Now, one of the things that we looked at in our very first example was something to do with QoS. Specifically, we can see that we have our priority queue usage alert that we used in our first example selected right here. Now, beyond that though, that was where we dove into looking at QoS from the point of view of an alert that actually came to us. But if we wanted to use this to validate QoS from outside of an alerting standpoint, we would actually make use of something like the component view. Now, I'm going to go ahead and minimize active sessions for now. That way our focus remains on component view here. Now, component view, what this really is it's a breakdown or a modular scaling of really all of our network devices that we're paying attention to within our UC environment, specifically our SIP environment. Now, if you're using this for something like QoS, take a look at these buttons at the top. Now, in terms of the very first button, UCD-M, that represents really the global, the global identity of what we're monitoring with UCD. So since UCD is the manager, because remember, the UCD-A registers to UCD-P, and then UCD-P registers, or maybe a better way to say that is monitored by UCD-M. So it flows upward to UCD-M, and that's why we're saying that UCD-M is like a global view of everything that's going on. Now, as you click these buttons to the right, what you're basically doing is going down the line or falling down the waterfall of looking at how your environment is being monitored right now. So of course, traversing to the next level from UCD-P and A, which are for monitoring on things like real-time media and SIP, going down a step further takes us to our routers, and then of course what's under our routers is of course our interfaces. Now, in terms of validating QoS, especially when it comes to our network views, when we go from routers into interfaces, we'll just look at one of these for now. Notice how our interfaces line up under our routers, but then we have some that actually have a queue next to the interface name themselves on the very far right. Now, in terms of what these numbers here mean under streams, streams is basically how many active calls are flowing through this interface on this router being monitored by this UCDP right now. But these notations here, this N and this Q and L, these all mean different things. So for example, since we're validating QoS, or at least discussing that right now, we're looking specifically at interface, which is labeled as Ethernet 3.1. In fact, one of the cool things about it right now is that as we're hovering over it, we see some statistic alerts, or some alerts about statistics and, gosh, I can't even talk, and performance and so on. Since we're looking at QoS specifically though, we can actually take our mouse and go over to the little magnifying glass. And right now I'm not clicking, I'm only hovering. But because this Q notation is there, I know that we can pull up some QoS statistics on this interface right now. So as I hit QoS, a lot of my search results, or search parameters I should say, are really auto-filled in for me. But this allows me to, by default, anytime I click that magnifying glass under QoS, look at QoS statistics for the last hour. I can change this if I want to, but for now I'm just going to go ahead and leave it as is and say submit. And then what we're looking at here is basically the packet drop amount alerts based off of what it's seen for this interface. Now right here, I'm going to step back for just a moment because we don't really care so much about the packet drop or packet drop levels on this interface right now because we're simply doing QoS validation. So I could go into bandwidth, albeit the easier thing to do for me is just to go into results. And here we get the same view as when we're first troubleshooting an issue where an event came in for a priority queue usage alert. In fact, we still see it on the right here. So it hasn't cleared yet, and that's because as we see now, that issue is still happening, albeit minutely, but it is still happening. So we see SIP is still configured for only 10% priority. We do have a cross here, but then we have an even larger cross down below on this timestamp here. So our priority queue, or rather our QoS queue size is set for 10%, but here we're already crossing right now at 13.74 at this time. So again, now this time we're not looking at QoS from the standpoint of an alert that came in. Instead, we're using our component view to validate QoS on our interfaces of the routers within our network. So that's basically the nitty-gritty of how you would go about doing that.